Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Running Tales podcast, where we look to tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. My name is Craig Lewis, and this week's podcast features the incredible Sarah Lavender Smith, Colorado resident Sarah, who has just told me I have to tell you all that she's 56 years old. That is completely relevant. She's run more than 100 ultras and marathons during 30 plus years in the sport. So, listen, folks, there's not much she doesn't know about running. But today we're going to be concentrating on just one race that she did recently, the Hardrock 100. Now, this world famous event in southern Colorado's San Juan Range, it's famed for being one of the toughest around. And for Sarah, it was really important, the culmination of a 10-year dream, which she finally, well, we won't say whether she succeeded or not. I hesitated probably enough to give you a clue there. But she finally lined up on the start line in July this year. So, without further ado, let's have a chat with Sarah and find out why this event was so important to her and how she got on. So, yeah, hi Sarah, welcome to Running Tales.
Hi, Craig. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this.
No, you're so welcome. So, I wanted to start really by going over a little bit about why Hard Rock was such an important race to you and why it became something that you were so desperate to get out there and be a part of.
Well, there are many layers of replies to that question. So first of all, I'm fortunate to live very close to the Hard Rock route. It's like I'm just outside of Telluride, and the Hard Rock route is a 100-mile loop around the San Juan Mountains that starts and finishes in Silverton, and it connects these old mining towns. And so, for one reason, it was important to me is my family roots are here. And my grandfather and his brother and my grandmother had an incredible history of mountain climbing and exploring these mountains in the late 1920s and early 1930s. And my grandpa was a miner at one of the mines along the route, and it's called Hardrock to pay homage to the hard rock miners. Hard rock mining is a special type of mining that's very difficult, very different than placer mining, which is what the California Gold Rush was based on. Placer mining is like catching the minerals as they flow through water, whereas hard rock mining is when you get into the mountain and bust it up with tools and dynamite. It's extremely dangerous. It's incredibly difficult working conditions. And so I've studied a lot of the mining history in this region, and of course, my grandfather's story. And so I'm fascinated by the history. And I wanted to kind of chase the ghosts of my ancestors and experience a little of what they did. I mean, in our era, we have to kind of manufacture adventure, whereas they just truly lived adventure in really treacherous conditions. So it was important for me on that level. And then I've just been a student of the event since really the early, the 2000s, like around the mid 2000s is when I first started paying attention to it. This year was the event's 30th running. It was started in 1992, but it had a handful of cancellations, so that's why the math doesn't add up. So this was the 30th run. The first time I had a hand in it was when I got to pace my friend in 2011. And being a pacer is like being an apprentice in terms of learning about the route and learning how to handle the conditions and troubleshoot. And it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, just to be, I'm lucky enough to be in these mountains kind of in a piecemeal way. But when you get to string it all together, it depends on how you count, but it's basically nine major mountain passes, any one of which would be an extremely difficult day hike. And they put them all together. It's extremely high elevation. Much of the course is above timberline, and you go over a lot of 13ers and one 14,000-foot peak. So anyway, I started pacing in 2011 and I started volunteering. But I didn't have the courage to run a mountainous 100 miler as a qualifier until 2015. So I started putting into the lottery in 2015, and the lottery is just a multi-year process. It got even more bottlenecked in 2020 because it was canceled in 2018 and 2019. So it was even hard. There's more of a backlog. So anyway, I could go on and on. Like you're probably not going to get a word in edgewise, right, Craig? Because I get so excited talking about this run.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things about it is almost the anticipation of, because it is, you touched on it there. It's pretty much impossible to get into it. You have to be someone who has a lot of
Yeah.
resilience and perseverance because of just how tough that lottery is.
Yeah,
I'm
and I can
going to
talk a little
hesitate.
bit.
Yeah.
I can talk about why it's so tough. One is it's limited to 146 participants by tradition and permitting and logistics. They're very strict about like they don't want to grow, and I appreciate that. So it's 146, but it's really only 140 because six of those spots are the race or run director's pick. Dale Garland really goes by the title run director because the old school concept of this event is it's a run rather than a race. And so there's always this tension of like, do they play up the competition, which Dale does by picking six elites who ordinarily wouldn't get in through the lottery, but they still call it a run to emphasize every runner is important and it's about individual achievement and the runner against the route versus the runner competing with others. So it's only 146 spots, and it's not like Western states where there are multiple avenues to entry. So I think Western states, which has 369 spots and also a crazy backlogged lottery, the Western States 100, you can get in as a longtime volunteer or as a sponsor candidate. There are a couple different ways, but Hardrock, you have to put in for the lottery unless you're one of the lucky six picked by the run director.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the other things we mentioned how tough it is to get in there. I suppose the other thing to mention is just how tough a run it is. I think I said race earlier, so apologies to the organisers, but yeah, just how tough a run it is because you can talk about things like it's 100 miler. You can talk about it's over a tough mountain range or ranges, but I'm not sure that to people who've not done it, I'm not sure that, which obviously I haven't. It doesn't quite tell the full story, and obviously you'd done parts of it before and have now taken on the whole event. How would you describe to people just how tough an event it is?
Well, here's the thing. Like I said, I feel like I was a student or apprentice of it for over
Yeah,
a decade. And in spite of all the times I ran pieces of it as a pacer or in training, all the race reports I read, all the videos I watched, truly nothing prepared me for how hard it was to put it all together in one go. And I think like, okay, why is it so hard? I mean, one is just with 33,000 feet of elevation gain at thin air, it's just the amount of vertical and the terrain is so treacherous. There's also the element of weather. Now, because we've been in drought, we have not for the past couple of years gotten the afternoon monsoon storms, whereas in it typically like you can get just like biblical storms with electricity and hail pelting down. And that's typical in the afternoon and evenings of the mountains around here. We had sort of had the opposite problem this past year and the prior year of it being so hot. It's almost like we suddenly had to heat train because the intensity of sunshine, full sun at high altitude is and it's just so dry and blazing hot. So those are reasons why it's difficult. And I just think, for me, it was the first time in a 100 miler I had to go into a second night. So think about this to put it into perspective. The elite runners, the podium contenders can squeak under, the men can squeak under 24 hours, and the top women finish around 25 hours. But most people in hard rock, the average time is right around 40 hours, and the cutoff is 48. So I was hoping for a 40-hour time. If you do the math, the average mile pace on that is it's over 23 minutes. So it's like a brisk
Yeah.
hike. And so you think, how can people be so slow? Like, it's so pedestrian. And actually, the nickname is hard walk because so much of it is unrunnable. You are hiking. And so you really have to think of it as a hike with runnable spots, and you have to cultivate patience. And I think a lot of top runners from different geographic regions, they just can't handle it being so slow and unrunnable in parts. But there are parts where you're like scrambling up scree, which is the little shards of rock, like whole mountainsides made of scree and a bigger rock called talus. And it's just slippery, and I say it's like cat litter on a slide. I mean, it's that hard to get up and down. So you are just hiking so much. You have to be a really patient hiker, and then you have to go past the second sunset.
Yeah.
From all my 100 milers before that, the slowest I've been was 35 hours, which was the afternoon of day two. So it was really tough. And I had two 10-minute naps to keep going into the second night sleep deprived and exhausted. So those are various things that make it tougher. Now there are more difficult 100 milers around here. Like Hardrock. Hardrock likes to pride itself on being the toughest 100-mile mountain ultra in North America. But some would argue, I mean, I could name a handful that are more challenging in some ways, like they don't have course markings or they involve more mountaineering. But in terms of a runnable run or allegedly runnable, um, it is so hard, and you do end up hiking a great deal.
Yeah, it always makes me so interested when we're talking about, I mean, ultra running in particular. I mean, with the Running Tales podcast, we kind of cover everything from five k up to however far people go, and obviously there's a whole load of running under 5k as well, of course. But when you get to cutting to these races like Hard Rock, it's and some of the other things, it really kind of inverted commas isn't running in a way. I mean, I've spoken to a lady, Kim Levinsky, on the podcast recently, and Kim did an FKT through the Catskills and her story, and she's just again talking about crazy hiking and so on. And I've also done a slightly tongue-in-cheek article about pedestrianism, which was a big sport in Victorian times, where one guy walked, and he was supposed to be walking 1,000 miles in 500 hours. And sometimes ultra running sort of reminds me of that rather than something that's closer to running.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is. I mean, the challenge is when you're on the hard rock course is when you see a runnable stretch, you run it.
Yeah.
Just when you can pick up your feet and, get under 15 minutes for a mile, you think, woo, I'm making up some time there. But yeah, patience is a virtue for sure.
And actually, I think that's probably quite an interesting point to dwell on from your own journey, because as we mentioned at the start, you're 56 now. You used to previously, I know you've spoken on your Substack newsletter, which we should mention. It's called Mountain Running and Living, folks. Go and check it out. It's really, really good. But you've spoken about how these days you're slower than you used to be, and how you've had to adapt to that, and not being able to go out and run as fast as you could over mile stretches and so on. But actually, in some ways, hard rock is playing into the strengths that you have these days.
That's right. And by the way, thank you for mentioning my Substack newsletter. It's called Mountain Running and Living, but the URL is sararunning.substack.com. So if people want to find it, sararunning.substack.com. But yeah, I think it's almost like a different kind of mode of locomotion, which I tend to call it trekking. It reminds me of like, or trekking, or what the Kiwis in New Zealand called tramping. It's just you move as efficiently as you can. It's all about efficiency and trying to move fluidly through the landscape. And you're just constantly shifting between hiking and picking your feet up, to which counts as a run. but it's just there's no clear delineation between walking and running. It's just you aim for efficient, smooth locomotion. And yeah, sometimes it's using your trekking poles and hands to get up a vertical head wall that's all slippery. So you're
Yeah.
sliding backwards. That's happened to me.
Yeah, it is so different. I mean, I've never done anything like hard rock. Don't get me wrong, but I did something called the Isle of Wight Challenge last year, which is it's just over 100K round the circumference of the Isle of Wight. And my wife and I, Michelle, we found ourselves just for the second half of it. We were with a guy who's quite experienced at it, and about halfway round, he just picked out his trekking poles and he said, "Right, we're walking from here." And really, okay. And we were just overtaking loads of people who were running and then crashing and running and crashing, and it was like we just
Yeah.
walked at a nice steady pace and yeah, did okay on it. So it's just such a different thing and such a different mindset. But
Yeah.
I suppose
And then,
sorry, go on.
sorry, I was going to say another reason it's slow is you end up taking more time at aid stations to change clothes
Yeah,
because, thermoregulation or managing your body temperature is tricky and strategic. And it's really, really hard in the high altitude with dry air when you're breathing hard to eat anything, like to chew and swallow. So when you're on the trail, you're mostly ingesting liquid or gel calories, which are easy to swallow. So when you do get to an aid station, it's important to spend some extra time and eat some solid food.
yeah. Um, so you finally got to the starting line of Hard Rock, and then and set off. How did it? I mean, I know this is a question that could lead to a long answer. I appreciate, but how did it actually go? And I guess the big question is, did it live up to all those expectations?
It definitely lived up to the hype. I'm so happy to say that. I mean, it was as special and exciting as everyone makes it out to be. So when I finally got going, first of all, I just felt so grateful because we woke up that morning in Silverton to some dense wildfire smoke. So a regional wildfire had blown all the smoke into the direction of Silverton. It was super depressing. And there was a question of whether the run would be canceled, which would be devastating. And so I think the run committee made the a smart call saying, look, if any of you are sensitive with asthma, you can defer and you can come back in a year and do it. Nobody took that option. I mean, when your drop bags are packed and you're ready to go, it's like, okay, we're going. And thankfully, after the first climb, the winds shifted, and by the second mountaintop, we had blue skies. So that turned out to not really be much of an issue. So I was just filled with gratitude. And, I had a friend another good runner who ran Hardrock a couple years ago. And I had asked her for advice because she's a faster runner than I am for sure. And it took her 45 hours, which sounded kind of slow to me, but she was okay with that. She finished. That was the key. So
Yeah,
it's like, how did you get through it? And she told me her mantra was no hurry, no worry. And that really stuck with me. So I was going along saying, no hurry, no worry, just soak it in. And I was just endeavoring to be really relaxed and in the mile I was in and just soak up and so I loved it. It was, the first 40 miles get you on the I should mention also to listeners, the Hard Rock route switches directions each year. And this year we were in the counterclockwise direction, which meant the first 40 or so miles were on the eastern side, which is the farthest away from my home. So I'm least familiar with it. So it was just really, it seemed very fresh and new to me. And so I just tried to, I almost ran like a tourist, just
yeah,
sightseeing. I was just so happy. And I didn't worry too much about how slow we were going. One thing that helped me is there were some notable runners who were around me and on the very vertical climbs, everyone has to go slow because you can only go as fast as the runners ahead of you. So for a while, I was right behind Jameel Curry, who's super experienced, the head of Air Viper running. He's done Hardrock a bunch of times. So I'm like, okay, if I'm with Jameel, I'm okay. He eventually pulled away. But that was just a nice start. So yeah, everything was great until I'll tell you the first hiccup. Um, well, more than a hiccup, it was like pretty serious setback mentally. So I get into the first major aid station, which was mile 30. And this is the first, they have a lot of aid stations along the way, but this is the first big one with crews can access if they want. And so one of the many things I love about Hard Rock is they have exceptional volunteer service. And so they endeavor to have one volunteer per runner. So it's like concierge service. So a volunteer comes up and sticks with you and helps you in however you can need help. So this really nice guy, he was like giving me a popsicle because it was hot out. He was helping me change my socks, doing all this stuff. And so I was just like wanting to make small talk. And so I said, "Hey, how's it going here? Like any drama, any news, like anything going wrong?" And all of a sudden his demeanor changed and he got very serious looking. Right. And I said, "Well, what?" He said, "I don't think you want to know." And I said, "No, actually I do. Like what's going on?" Because I know the run director and the run committee. If they were dealing with something, I was just curious to know about it. And then his face turned dead serious. He said, "Hard Rock had its first fatality." I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, this woman on the very first mountain pass, just a few hours into the event, dropped dead." And he didn't know a lot of details, but I said, "Who is it?" And he told me the name, Elaine, and that she was in her 60s. And she was one of the few 60 plus women I hadn't met. And so I just like everything changed in my mind and my spirit. And I just like, I didn't know the woman, so I couldn't really picture her, but I could imagine the runners and sweepers and photographers who had to deal with it and search and rescue. And then I felt my heart just really went out to the run director and the sadness and stress. This guy, the volunteer, told me, he's like, "We got word of it because someone got on the radio to inform the aid stations that she wouldn't be coming through. And it was someone other than Dale because Dale was too emotionally distraught to deliver the message himself." And so it's just so sad. So it
Yeah.
was extremely sobering. And so I left, I left the aid station just with my mind imagining the awful thing that must have happened, whether it was, I didn't know if it was an accident or a cardiac problem or what. And so because I was caught up mentally in that, I missed a key turn. I was on this hot exposed access road and I missed the turn onto single track. So I went like a half mile in the wrong direction, realized my mistake, turned around. And that was a low point. I was just depressed, but I was able to turn it around when I got to the next aid station and a friend was volunteering there. And it just put everything into perspective. I thought, oh my gosh, I am so lucky to be out here. I'm so lucky I'm alive. Like, who cares about whether this takes me 40 or 42 or 46 hours? I'm alive and I'm doing it. And so that was a boost to like when I regained that perspective, I kind of regained the relaxation of just saying, okay, let's do this. Let's appreciate every mile. And then I got going from there and made it up and over the high point of the route, which is the 14,000-foot peak called Handy's, right at sunset. And so yeah, that was not something I expected to happen in the first half. And I was one of the few runners who had that news. Like most runners didn't know about it until the end. It's just I had been nosy and asked that volunteer. So that's how I found out.
Yeah, and I mean, it is just a huge reminder of just how tough these events are and what can happen. And we do these people do these crazy things and they're great, but there is, I suppose, danger inherent in them. And I guess your mind can go to one of a couple of places or perhaps both at the same time, which is like, well, my what potentially my why for this, which seems so huge at the start, kind of seems a bit pointless now, and therefore that's why I guess we talk about that feeling a bit depressed. But then, yeah, the way you flipped it round into,
Yeah.
well, actually, it doesn't matter compared to this, so let's just enjoy it. Is yeah, really
Yeah.
interesting how the psychology of it works, I suppose.
And I looked into her and her background afterwards. She was extremely experienced, extremely good shape. I don't know what the autopsy results ever showed, but I mean, it seems like something cardiac related. Like it should, so it was just, it was very hard for the people around her who had to, I'm friends with the photographer, Howie Stern, who administered chest compressions and everything. He was pretty traumatized. So anyway, that cast a shadow, but we got it, I just focused again on getting aid station to aid station. What I had to look forward to was some family members and my good friends and my crew up ahead. So that really kept me going.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is when you're taking on a 100 miler, I mean, obviously that's a pretty extreme and pretty horrific incident, but you've got to be able to, over that amount of distance, just whatever else happens, keep your mind on the course and moving forward, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep my mind on process oriented goals. I was doing the math in my head and realizing that like I was behind what were my ideal splits and I just had to let them go. I was like, okay, don't get upset. You're not quite on 40-hour pace. That you finish is to win it. And so my process oriented goals were like, don't hurt yourself. And I'm so proud I never tripped and fall. Like I caught a toe a couple times, but I saved myself. So I was like, that was a big one. I'm like, I don't want to fall and get hurt. Another big one was just making sure I was super smart about my hydration and electrolytes and my fueling. Fueling went off the rails later, which we can talk about later, but I did stay hydrated and like my fingers didn't get puffy. Which was a challenge in that dry, hot air. And so just so much of success at this kind of 100 miler is what I call systems management. So it's not about how fast you are. It's about your endurance and about being smart to maintain your hydration, fueling, thermoregulation, and my lungs. Like I was trying my lungs, I have respiratory issues, and especially with the wildfire smoke. I was really trying not to overtax my lungs by hyperventilating. So I was trying to moderate my breathing. So that, you know, I had many hours to work on that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as well with as you mentioned earlier, a relatively sort of smaller field and spread out some degree over 100 miles. Are you taking this on almost on your own for a lot of it, which means you have, I suppose, even more time to think about those things, good and bad?
Yeah, I never ran with anyone for any significant amount of time. I was leapfrogging with some people. I felt good that when I got to the hardest part of the 14,000 foot peak, I actually caught up to a lot of people. Like going uphill is my strong point, and then people tend to pass me on the downhills because my knees and back hurt when I run downhill. I did close some gaps. But yeah, I was mostly by myself. And I picked up my first pacer at around mile 44. So the first 44 miles, I was mostly solo.
And I love the way that in ultra running we talk about things like 44 miles, like it's just kind of the start of the race.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't, I mean, the easiest part is the first daytime hours. Like after the sun goes down and you're around the halfway point, that's when things get interesting.
Yeah. And for people who haven't who perhaps haven't run at night, I suppose what's it at Hardrock, but just generally, I suppose, when you're taking on these huge distance, what's it like to kind of run through the night when you're starting to feel tired and you're starting to, your body's saying, I'm not ready to go to sleep now. Thank you very much.
I always slow down in the dark because my vision isn't that great. Even though I have a good double light system, I have a headlamp and then I have a light on my waist. So the two together help my depth perception. But I still slow down just because I can't see that well. But it's beautiful in these mountains where there's no light pollution. I mean, the stars are just brilliant, unless it's cloudy. But we had a beautiful starry night. Um, and it's just, I did okay in the dark. My stomach started to go after dark. So for me, all my focus was on managing nausea or working through it. And whether it was dark or daytime didn't matter. I was just sick to my stomach.
Yeah, well, I mean that's another big thing, isn't it? Getting that nutrition, and however hard you train for it, you just don't know and plan it and eat all the right stuff during training that you're going to have in an actual run. You just never know what's going to happen. How do you get through something like that when you start to feel ill like that?
Yeah.
Is it a case of finding something that will settle your stomach, or just going, I might have this for another 30 miles, but I'm just going to keep going?
Yeah, so I was really disappointed because I had worked so hard with a sports nutritionist to develop a really foolproof fueling plan, and to a large degree it succeeded. And the hydrate, like I said, that I never got dehydrated or felt like my salt was imbalanced, so that's good. So here's the thing, I the weirdest mistake I never anticipated. Of all the things I thought could go wrong, I did not expect this. So, what happened, or my mistake, was of all the trail snacks I carried, which were basically the simple sugar stuff. So, hydration mix, chews, and gels. Those are what I could get down while moving. I had very few solid foods because, like I said, it's hard to chew and swallow in the dry, thin air. So I had a ton of chews and gels, which worked great until they didn't. So the problem was the flavors I had chosen were almost exclusively fruity, tangy citrus flavors. Not, I should have had more vanilla or chocolate or mild flavors. So what happened is after like 20 to 22 hours, my tongue started breaking out in sores from citric acid, and I started throwing up super acidic gastric acid because I had too much citric acid. It's like I just did too much fruity stuff. Um, and so once I started throwing up and my tongue was killing me, like it made it so unpalatable to want to eat anything. Even when like I got to the halfway point aid station and my friend made me some instant mashed potatoes. I was like, that kind of sort of went down well. And then I had a chocolatey recovery shake that could go down. But then the minute I tried to have all these gels or tangy chews that I was really relying on for calories, they backfired. And so my
Yeah.
stomach just it was horrible. I was either puking or I was dry heaving. And so my stomach really started to hurt because it was just cramping and felt like it was turning inside out. So that was just so frustrating. When I was heading to meet my family the second time, I kind of tuned into my body. I'd just been puking and puking. And I'm like, what do I want? And I'm like, oh, I want some milk, which was kind of interesting. Like my body knew it wanted to coat my stomach and neutralize the
Yeah.
acid. So when I met my husband at three-quarters of the way through, he had this pint of cold milk. I just chugged it. Like it could have been a milk commercial. I was like, who drinks a pint of cold milk middle? But that was like what I needed and wanted.
Yeah.
And later when I was throwing up more, like I did not throw up the milk. It was more of the gels and chews again. I really wish in hindsight, I didn't think of it at the time, but if I had had the pink Pepto-Bismol, which is like the medicine that coats your stomach, I should have gotten some of
Yeah.
that. But like I said, I had prepared for so many problems: my sprained ankle, my sore knees, my bad lungs. Like I was ready to troubleshoot all that. And my body behaved, like all those body parts behaved really well. It was my
Yeah.
stupid tongue and my burning throat and my acidic stomach. So you just never know. Like, the old saying in ultras, it's like the thing you think will be a problem usually turns out not to be because it's something else. And that was
Yeah.
totally what happened to me.
Yeah, I mean that kind of gets me thinking. I mean, you're talking about some other things that could have gone wrong. Thankfully, didn't. You're talking about having to slow down at night, and it's a bit worrying about the pain of going downhill, about having sores on your tongue and being sick. Now, there's some people who listening to this who are probably very good runners, but might not take on more than, I don't know, a half marathon, maybe a marathon, and they're probably screaming at the screen now, going, "Why on earth do you want to do this stuff where you feel so sick and so horrible and it's so tough?" I suppose, what's your why? Because this isn't your only 100 miler.
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, it was so important to me to finish,
Yeah,
because one thing is if you don't finish Hard Rock, if you DNF, you lose all your accumulated lottery tickets. So it means I could
yeah,
never try it again. So even if I wasn't having the race of my dreams, I knew in the back of my mind there was a chance I'd want to give it a better shot another year. And if I had lost all my lottery tickets accumulated over a decade, there's no way I could start qualifying. And, I'd be 70 and hobbling by the time I got in a second time. So that was a huge motivator,
yeah.
not to drop and lose the chance to ever do it again. But I just, there are certain races that matter and other races that don't. I mean, I generally am not someone who DNFs. I've only like, let's see, three DNF, maybe four DNFs to my name. But one of them happened this May at a 50 miler. And it was, a training run for Hard Rock back in May, and I sprained my ankle. And by mile 43, my gait was off. I wasn't running well because of the sore ankle. And the last 7 miles were downhill. And I thought, there's no reason for me to run downhill 7 miles on a bad ankle. Like,
Yeah.
it would just sabotage my bigger goal of Hard Rock. So I dropped. So I have a DNF, which I was fine with. It was a smart thing to do. But then when you have these top level goals, you'll do whatever it takes to finish it. And I was just so stressed that thankfully I was never chasing cutoffs. Like I always had enough of a time cushion that was reassuring. I knew I had the time. I was just truly worried I'd like pass out and lose consciousness, maybe hit my head, and then I won't be able to finish. So
Yeah.
that was the scary part. Like I could never relax and say, "Oh, I've only 10 more miles. I got this in the bag." I was like, "Oh no, anything can happen along the way." And I was so close to collapsing from lack of energy. And we didn't talk about how, like, by the second nightfall, I was having crazy hallucinations. So I was just like super, just trying to keep my wits about me and just keep going. It was hard.
How important when you're in that sort of phase of the run is, I suppose, the training that you've done and the resilience that you've built up over previous races, because you must be dealing with things at that stage that inverted commas normal people would never get near.
Yeah, it so this definitely is an event that rewards experience. And I was so grateful. I have paced, as I said, I've been the accompanied Hard Rock runners in prior years when they have struggled in the final stretch. And I kept remembering my experience in 2017 when there's this guy from the Bay Area of California, and he came to Colorado. He finally got into Hard Rock, and I accompanied him as a pacer the final 30 miles. This guy is a really good runner. Like back in the Bay Area, he would podium, top three finish at most ultras. And he optimistically thought, like, oh, he should finish by the second sunset. Like he'd be out there maybe 36 hours tops. So one thing after another went wrong during his Hard Rock, and it was really challenging weather. The altitude just did him in. So by the time I started going with him, he was chasing cutoffs. He
Yeah.
was on the verge of falling apart. And he was so extremely slow. I mean, this speedy guy going a snail's pace. At one point, at like mile 80, I'm talking to him. I'm like, Mark, come on, and I was like wondering why he wasn't talking to me. And I look around and he had fallen asleep with his chin down toward his chin, his chin down toward his chest, his arms propped on trekking poles. So he looked like a scarecrow just standing there, and he had fallen asleep standing up. Like
Wow.
that's how to. And so since I had witnessed that and still saw him finish, it was so useful knowing like, okay, if he can do that and I'm not quite chasing cutoffs, like I can
Yeah.
get through this,
Yeah.
and just I tell myself too that like the worse that the more I am struggling, the more pride there is to finish. It's not that you should feel discouraged by struggling. It's more like, okay, this is bonus points for extra effort. Like it's going to feel that much better to get through it.
And I think there's an element with these sort of races where the struggle is part of it. I think if the struggle wasn't going to happen, then people probably wouldn't do these races, would they?
No, I mean I just it is it's disappointing to not be a closer, like someone who finishes strong. And if I had struggled, I wish I had struggled in the middle and then revived and felt
Yeah.
great. And like a woman I really admire, who's faster than I am, but was behind me in Hardrock. She was having such a difficult day. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Her name was Hillary Yang, and she had been behind me in Hardrock. She was having so much difficulty with nausea and other issues. But then she got better. And so she passed me around mile 85. I was really happy for her because that's like the race. If I'm going to struggle, I'd like to get my lungs and my head back, or my legs back, and be able to at least run. But toward the end, I was getting past a lot and I didn't care. I just wanted to finish, and not fall apart. Like it was. Yeah, I was just trying to hold it. I mean, I was just having a horrible dry heaving and crazy hallucinations. And so I just was like, just trying to get through it. That's when I was really thankful to have my friend as a pacer with me because otherwise I might have just had a breakdown out there. Like, you know, it does help to have a pacer speaking encouragement and convincing me I actually am going the right way.
Oh yeah, the pacers and the crews and the people you see along the way, and these things are they're just. I've spoken to so many people who've spoken about the massive difference that they obviously make.
Yeah.
But we've kind of danced around it a little bit, and we should now say that of course you did finish the Hard Rock 100. You did get to the end. How did it feel in that moment of crossing that finish line and going,
Yeah.
wow, because it's a journey of 100 miles plus
Yeah.
all those years of preparation and everything else.
Well, yes, it took me 46 hours. So I had told my crew like best case scenario would be around 40 hours and then prepare for me to take around 44 hours. And I took even 2 hours longer than that. So that was kind of, I had that hurt my ego a little bit, and yet I was still proud. But I felt just enormous relief in with about a half mile to go. Um, my husband and friend met my pacer and me at the corner to run us in. And, I want to say like, oh, it was amazing. It was like the best moment of my life. It actually wasn't that great. It was kind of anticlimactic. So I was super stressed out because I had been dry heaving and making these terrible, awful noises, but it was like I had no control over it. It's like when you're in labor, and you scream or something. I was like making these disgusting retching noises uncontrollably. Just like I would try to jog and try to get running, and I'd like have to bend over and make these noises. So approaching the finish, when I could finally see the lights up ahead and stuff, I got stressed out because they had a live stream and I knew like this was going to be televised. I'm like, I don't want anyone to see me like this. And so all I was doing, I felt really tense. And so I literally, yeah, I did turn the corner, I'm making myself run, and the only thoughts going through my head were, don't puke on Dale. Don't puke on Dale, which is the run director, because I knew I'd like finish, kiss the rock, and then Dale would give me a hug. And I didn't want to get sick and on him. I didn't want the live stream to capture the horrible noises. So I was kind of stressed out. And then, it was sad because the prior year in 2024, I had volunteered as I was a volunteer at the finish line aid station in the gymnasium next to the finish line. And I had all these plans about I was going to go into the gym and eat good food and hang out. And it's like, so in 2024, I was thinking, oh, I hope I get to finish next year and hang out here. It was like became important to me. But when I actually finished, I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I saw my husband. I'm like, we got to go. So I didn't hang out. We just made a beeline for a motel, which was a few blocks away. And so I kind of rushed the finish because I was in such distress. I was like, I just needed to finally let myself collapse and I needed to get horizontal. I needed to be sick or whatever. And so we made it to the hotel and then I just collapsed, got in a tub. So I will say that a few hours later on the Sunday morning, they had the big breakfast celebration with awards and stuff. That's when I felt all the warm, fuzzy
Yeah.
feelings of accomplishment. That's when I celebrated. So I did get the moment of accomplishment, like, oh my God, I'm so glad I finished. I'm so glad I'm a part of this. But at the finish line, it's kind of funny now. It was a bit anticlimactic.
Well, I read a few things about Hardrock after it happened, and saw one or two that live stream. And so, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it might even have been on your Substack where you featured one of the other ladies finishing. She
Yeah,
was, I think,
and
the
the
last lady to finish or
yes.
something. And it was truly inspiring. But I did also think this poor woman has just run 100 miles, looks exhausted, and there's cameras in her face like that.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone captures, it's a big deal to capture the last official finisher before the 48-hour cutoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was exciting for her. I know, I'm glad. I mean, at 40, no one really cares about someone finishing at 46 hours. So, like, thankfully, people hopefully were asleep and not really watching it when I came through. But yeah, that was if I did have the opportunity to do it again, I could do it again. I would definitely try to savor that moment longer.
Well, that brings me to our next question, which you've probably been anticipating, because I know you wrote about it you obviously wrote about the experience on Substack reasonably soon afterwards. And you were kind of to and froing a little bit about whether you'd ever look to do it again and that. How are you feeling about that? Like a month or
Yeah,
so
it's so
on.
my pacer and I had a conversation last few miles because she's a older runner I really, really respect. And she had made a deliberate decision a few years ago to retire from 100 milers. And so she does shorter ultras now. And so I said, Sophie, tell me about your decision to retire. Like, and so we talked about it. And I was thinking, if I'm gonna not do any more hundreds, this is the best one to end on. Like the go out with a bang with the biggest and best. And I like that was actually a big motivator for me to finish. So in the final painful miles, I had my new mantra was one and done, one and
Yeah,
done. Like this is it. I never have to do this again. And so right after I finished cross the finish line, kissed the rock, which is the tradition, and I got with my husband, I'm like, let's go back to the motel. So we're scurrying on these dark side streets. I'm like, I'm never doing 100 again. And he stops. He's like, wait, I have to record this. And I'm like, no, Morgan, really, I'm done. And he's like, and he's an attorney. He's like, I'm going to draw up a contract for you to sign. Because he was laughing, but because he didn't believe me. But
yeah.
I felt so certain about that. And it took about maybe 36 hours. And then the mind starts going. So I think like I think about how I had the trouble of the citric acid and gastric acid stuff. I'm like, okay, if I could avoid that, I could have done so much better. And then the real thing that gets me curious is Hardrock, as I said, reverses direction. And so my mind starts thinking, okay, there's this incredibly difficult head wall that we have to crawl up at mile 84. What would it be like to plunge down it at mile 16 in the other direction? And so you start thinking about the mountain passes and doing them the other way. And it just is intellectually curious.
Yeah.
So I will put in for the lottery again. So we'll see. I'm okay with it either way. I still I was able to do Western States 100 back in 2016, and I'm putting in for the lottery for that as well too, because I would love to do Western States again once in my life. But yeah, so I'm backpedaling on my declaration to my husband, which he's not crazy about.
It's lucky you didn't
But it's
sign the
also
contract.
so cliche, of course. Like, of course I'm
Yeah.
going to say that, and then I change my mind.
That's the basic rules of running and ultra running anyway, to say at the end of the race you're never going to do it again and then just sign up for something else as soon as you can a couple of days later. So yeah, I think you're okay there.
Well, I
Um
did sign up for something the following week, which I did. So after Hard Rock, I felt like I didn't feel like a runner anymore. Like my running had devolved into high alpine
yeah.
hiking. So I really doubted whether I could run well anymore. So 2 weekends ago, there was a relatively flat half marathon in the area. So right after our Hard Rock, I signed up for that. I'm like, I need to get my running legs back. I need to prove I can run 13 miles without walking breaks, which actually seemed very hard to me at the time.
Yeah.
So I did it. So that was like after Hard Rock, I wanted something very different. I wanted to feel like a runner. I wanted to have a strong half marathon. So, after I didn't really run for a couple weeks. And then I was like, okay, let's go back to flatter routes and remember how to run. And so I did that. And I did that half marathon a couple weekends ago. So that felt good.
No, that's awesome. And just to be able to run so soon after 100 miler is an achievement. So to smash out a half marathon
Yeah.
is pretty cool. Um, just finally, Sarah, I wanted to ask, not necessarily hard rock, I suppose, because as we've said, that's something that's really extreme. But I suppose the question is, why should runners do what is so special about doing whatever a runner's individual extreme is? For you, it was hard rock. For others, it might be a 5K or a half marathon or a marathon or whatever it is. Why should people pursue those dreams?
I think, well, one is I think you should pursue variety. And so if you've done a bunch of road marathons, then why not challenge yourself to do 26 miles or 40K, 42K on trail? Like, why not switch it up?
Mm.
So it's more like I think for challenge, it's nice to change terrain and distance. But then, I think finding a race that's special to you in some way, in terms of the destination, in terms of the terrain and landscape, um, you know, go to it because you want to experience that landscape intimately. So my two special races are one is Hard Rock, and then the other is this desert stage race called the Grand Ultra, which is totally different. It's like the Marathon des Sables of North America. So it's the self-supported stage race. But I love being in the desert, and
Mm.
combining it with
Which,
camping.
which folks Sarah will be too she'll be too modest to tell you this, so I'm going to tell you that she's won that race. So yeah.
But I've been back to, yeah, but that's like my heart was really into it. So I guess you have to listen to your heart, and it's not about FOMO or like your friend is doing something or like, oh my God, I have to be in Chamonix. Everyone's doing UTMB, which I haven't done because I'm not interested in that. Follow your heart about what really interests you and where you want to put your effort. Because I think, we have a limited amount of ultras under are about. I mean, I know my running has a shelf life and it's going to devolve increasingly to being just a hiker, which is great. Like it's all locomotion. I can still get around the mountains, but I am choosy about what I run, and I have to feel like there's genuine motivation there. There's something I want to get out of it. Um, so yeah, but I do recommend variety. That's why I did a half marathon after the 100 miler, and it's all relative. Like the half marathon seemed really hard, and it was.
Yeah. Oh well, I think that's brilliant advice, and I definitely urge everybody listening and watching us today to go and try that out. And Sarah, well done on Hard Rock. Congratulations on achieving your dream. It really is an absolutely stunning achievement. So yeah, absolutely seriously well done, and look forward to you hopefully doing it again. And
Well, thank
yeah.
you so much, and I hope to get over to your area to run. I mean, there are definitely UK races that have been on my bucket list. So
Yeah. Oh well, fantastic. Well, if you come over here, yeah, look us up and we'll see what
yeah.
running we can do together. Although I'm not sure I'll be able to make 100 mile without significant training. But yeah, thank you for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast. I really appreciate you spending some time to me and talking us through your hard rock story. Folks, if you've enjoyed this, do check out Sarah's Substack, Mountain Running and Living. We'll put that URL that she mentioned earlier in the show notes so you can go and find it. It's really really good. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and review. Do all the normal podcasty stuff, but also, we like to encourage you just to talk to people about it. We always talk about going a little bit digital and clicking that like and share, but actually, the best thing we'd like to do is for people to go and talk about these things. So please do that, and please come and join us again on the Running Tales podcast next week.